Welcome everyone to the regular meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, November 16th. Hasqualawin, Queeslukmuk, Latskohomish, Okameo. We're meeting tonight on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. And welcome to all those participating tonight in council chambers as well as online. Council motion to adopt the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any notice of motion? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4. We have a proclamation request from the province to declare November 2021 as Adoption Awareness Month in the District of Squamish. Is there someone that would like to move that? Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, consideration of unscheduled public attendance. This is anyone with an issue that they feel they need to speak to council about that cannot wait for 2 weeks for the next regular business meeting. Seeing no hands, moderator, there's nothing online. We'll move on. We have one timed item this evening that is related to development permit. DP000558 with variances for 1189 and 1201 Wilson Crescent. So I will turn it over to staff for the presentation. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Vrish Prahalad, planner with the Community Planning Department. Tonight, I will be presenting development permit application for a 12-unit townhouse development proposed at 1189 and 1201 Wilson Crescent in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood, which is requesting 4 variances. The subject properties are located at 1189 and 1201 Wilson Crescent and are currently developed with single-unit dwellings. The properties are zoned RM1, which allow for townhouse dwellings. The OCP land use designation is residential neighborhood. The site is subject to DPA 3 universal guidelines and is within the flood hazard area. The majority of the properties are zoned RM1, but there are a few multiple unit residential 2 and multiple unit residential 3 parcels. The Wilson Crescent neighborhood has been zoned for multi-unit. Sorry, our presentation is stuck. It's not doing anything.
Yeah, you just have to click on them. It's brand new now. Oh, it's not going
It's
on.
not. It's not doing it.
That one went down. The network went down.
Sorry, everyone. We're just going to recess for 5 minutes to sort out this technical difficulty. Okay, thanks everyone for your patience. We're back on track, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Prahalad again. Oh, except it's not showing on our big screen now. Although that is a lovely painting. And unfortunately, what some communities look like after Monday.
The Wilson Crescent neighborhood has been zoned for multi-unit development for several decades, although many properties continue to be used as single detached housing. The Wilson Crescent microplan provides a summary of conditions, planning, and service issues, and contains a series of guidelines to manage future development applications in the area. Secondary plans like this ones are tools that help identify community needs and priorities on a more neighborhood-specific level and help guide new rezonings and district-led initiatives in the area. The application of the Wilson Crescent microplan is at a policy level only and helps guide review and processing of development applications by placing a local lens or perspective. DP000558 is seeking approval to allow for the construction of 8 3-bedroom and 4 4-bedroom townhouses on the southeast corner of Wilson Crescent. The 4-bedroom units will have double car garages, and the 3-bedroom units will have tandem parking with a single car garage and a covered outdoor parking stall behind. 24 resident parking stalls have been provided with 3 visitor stalls and 2 accessible stalls for a total of 27 parking spaces. Each unit will have 2 Class A bicycle parking stalls for a total of 24 Class A stalls with 20 vertical and 4 horizontal stalls. 6 Class B stalls have been provided as well. The development will be accessed through one entry off of Wilson Crescent. The Woodnerf design is a living street where pedestrians and cyclists have legal priority over motorists. A 2-meter wide saw-cut concrete sidewalk with a statutory right-of-way for public access is provided along the front setback, along with a pocket park. Each unit has a private rear yard with private balconies on both the front and back of the second stories, except for building 1. The development is subject to Development Permit Area 3 Universal Guidelines. This was included in your report package today as an appendix to your report. The units will have pitched, pre-finished dark charcoal sheet metal roofs, keeping in line with the traditional form and character of the Wilson Crescent neighborhood. Building materials will consist of natural wood shiplap vertical sidings, with units alternating between stained walnut brown and stained red to reflect the vibrant and funky character of Wilson Crescent. Entryways will have corrugated trapezoid white metal sheet cladding, and unit doors will alternate between various shades of red. The driveway is lined with unit pavers in a pattern design creating a Woodnerf, which gives pedestrians and cyclists priority over motorists. The communal amenity space will include inclusive play objects, a climbing boulder, picnic tables, and shade structures. The front setback of the development has a concrete sidewalk, bicycle parking, and a pocket park with log play structures, benches, planting, and a community library. A communal seating area covered by a tree canopy will also be provided in the southeast section of the development. The development's landscaping accommodates public use in the front setback, community assembly in the middle of the development, and private rear yards for each unit. The proposal mostly conforms to the zoning bylaw with the exception of the following variances. The application is seeking a variance to section 10.6 for the rear yard setback from 9.15 meters to 5.32 meters to allow for the encroachment of 4 townhomes by 2 meters and the projection of second-story patios by 1.83 meters for a total intrusion of 3.83 meters. Please note that the 2-meter encroachment is the same as the 2-meter statutory right-of-way provided in the front of the development. Also, please note that during the zoning bylaw update early next year, staff is recommending that the rear yard setbacks for RM1 and RM2 zones be reduced from 9.15 meters to 4.57 meters. A variance to section 10.6 for the interior side setback from 4.57 meters to 2.74 meters to accommodate the projection of second-story patios. A variance to section 4 that will reduce the side yard setback for an accessory building from 1.52 meters to 0.9 meters away from the interior yard setback. And lastly, a variance to section 1 definitions to change the usable open space common definition to have dimensions less than 4.57 meters and include areas for the required front setbacks. The side yard setback is not the first variance request of this type. Harbor House, another townhouse development in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood, had a similar variance. Multi-unit zones typically require a significantly higher setback from the interior side than zones for single unit dwellings. The variance is minimal and allows for a functional patio. Best practices dictate that patios have minimum widths and lengths of 6 feet to be functional. Buildings 4 and 5 meet the interior setback, meaning that the intrusion to the setback is limited to the second-story balcony, limiting the potential disturbances to adjacent properties. Buildings 2 and 3 are seeking a reduction in the rear setback due to the fact that the communal amenity play space is located in the middle of the development rather than being placed at the rear of the development. Staff are supportive of the variances. Variances are discouraged in the Wilson Crescent plan because they may set a precedent, and the variances should not be considered unless a community benefit is identified. The development is providing a 2-meter wide sidewalk and a park in the front of the yard. The applicant would also be providing infrastructure improvements to Wilson Crescent that will address the lack of pedestrian facilities and difficult intersections. Number 1, the northeast corner of Wilson Crescent. A concrete curb, bulb, or bump out will be provided where the Wilson Crescent two-way meets Buckley Avenue. This improvement will prevent vehicles traveling south on Buckley Avenue from cutting the corner and driving on the gravel shoulder. If there is room, an entrance median will be installed to prevent vehicles from cutting across the eastbound lane when turning left from Buckley Avenue. Number 2, southwest corner of Wilson Crescent. This corner has been highlighted by the district as a dangerous pedestrian environment due to the poor sight lines and the sharp turning radius. To address this, the applicant will be providing the pedestrian infrastructure in this corner by providing a concrete curb and sidewalk. Regrading of this corner will likely be required due to the improvements. The existing ditch will remain in place. And lastly, the southeast corner of Wilson Crescent, a concrete curb or bump out will be provided where the Wilson Crescent one-way meets Buckley Avenue. Tightening up the road with curbing will force the vehicles to the south side of the road, as vehicles currently turning left and right can both simultaneously be in the intersection and provide better protection and sight lines for pedestrians. Signage will also be updated to prevent vehicles from entering Wilson Crescent at this end. DP558 was presented to the advisory design panel on April 15th, 2021. The project passed with the following motions: address the 2 units facing Wilson Crescent to improve their orientation towards the street, look at opportunities to create artistic elements in the paving, and the consensus of the panel was not to reorient the units for the purpose of increasing interior park space. The project meets most of the DPA3 guidelines and also supports some policy within the OCP. This development is well aligned with the Wilson Crescent microplan. In order to offset the variance requests, the development will be providing a parklet in the front setback, a sidewalk with public access, as well as the road and infrastructure improvements to Wilson Crescent. The Wilson Crescent plan also includes guidelines meant to supplement the OCP guidelines. Please note that these guidelines do not form a new development permit area and cannot be applied to the same degree as the guidelines of DPA3. DP558 was posted to the district's development showcase and a development sign was installed on the property. No request for a public information meeting was received and no public information hearing was held. Variance notices were sent out to residents within 100 meters of the property. 3 comments have been received to date. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish authorize the issuance of Development Permit 558 as presented for the properties located at 1189 and 1201 Wilson Crescent, subject to consolidation of both lots, the registration of a statutory right-of-way, registration of a no gas covenant, registration of a railway noise and vibration covenant, registration of a flood covenant, and providing blocking for grab bars in the bathrooms and powder rooms, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute DP 558. Alternatively, council cannot authorize the development permit and refer this development back to staff. Thank you. At this time, I welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pollard. So I'm going to go to council first for any clarifying questions before I open it up to the public. So council, do you have any questions at this time? Councilor Pettengill?
Thanks. There's a comment in the presentation that the setbacks were, I think, impacted by the right of way. And I just want to make sure I understand. Is the suggestion that if there wasn't a right of way for the footpath, then, or sidewalk, I should say, that they wouldn't need the setback variance? Or is it just because they're providing the right of way, that's some rationale for accepting some setbacks, reductions in setbacks?
Through the mayor, correct. The rationale was just because they were providing that 2-meter sidewalk. That's one of the reasons why they decided to move back into the rear yard setback. But I would also like to note that the planning department is only supporting the variances because they are providing the improvements to Wilson Crescent at the 3 intersections.
Councilor Race?
Thank you. I know there's no parking variance being requested. I'm just wondering, does the zoning bylaw distinguish at all between tandem parking versus other forms of parking?
Through the mayor, I believe it does. But we'd have to check.
Councilor Herford?
Thank you. In your presentation, there is a bit of foreshadowing about some upcoming recommended changes to setbacks, and I was wondering the location of this waste facility that is part of the. I'm curious about its siting at the sort of right, very far into the property. We've seen some recently where it was placed in the front for a number of reasons. I was curious why that location was landed on and supportable.
Through the mayor, based on the siting of the townhome development, that was the only available space for the waste room. We have received a few comments from our from the district about waste trucks backing up along next to the play area, and we will be addressing that either through some sort of landscape barrier or fencing.
Thank you. And the 2 meters at the front for the sidewalk, was this seems like a sort of a trade from the beginning, rather than looking at the front and saying we're going to need to lose 2 meters at the front for this sidewalk to make this something that the community will accept. And I'm just curious how that trade-off was sort of landed upon, because I don't. Is that something that staff would consider as a standard? We're going to need 2 meters at the front, so we're going to give 2 meters of this of the rear setback.
Through the mayor, no, that is not a trade-off that the planning department supports. The original development proposed the 2-meter setback into the rear yard, and we only supported that once the Wilson Crescent infrastructure improvements were provided.
Other questions? Mr. Valniscus.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to answer or confirm the question from Council Race about tandem parking. So our zoning bylaw does specify or has a definition for tandem parking, and only certain zones do not permit it. So it's generally a permitted type of parking, unless in some CD comprehensive development zones where it's specifically called out.
Thank you. A different question. Thank you, Mr. Belanishkas. Just with respect to the waste room, I'm wondering, just looking at the overhead diagram, is there some reason it couldn't be brought back into the development? Would it somehow obstruct something inside the development if it was just moved from the top of the diagram down a little bit?
Through the mayor, the waste room is cited where it is currently due to the fact that there is a parking stall for one of the townhomes that is fairly close to it, and then there'd be an issue accessing the waste room if there was a car parked in that parking stall.
Thank you.
I'm just curious why there isn't consistency with all the setbacks around the second story balcony. So on the west side, we're only providing the patio at ground level, but then in all the other setbacks, we are providing that second level balcony. And I'm wondering if you could just speak to why that is.
Through the mayor, there is a policy in the Wilson Crescent microplan 4.22J, which requires increased interior yard setbacks where new 3-story or higher buildings are proposed next to adjacent lower density or height uses. So the reason why the patios were removed from building 1 was because they were facing a 1-story single unit dwelling, whereas the other patios are facing multi-unit dwelling units.
But some of our feedback from the community is saying that those balconies are looking right at each other. And so when we're working with developers, you know, those of us who live in multifamily developments actually deserve a bit of privacy too. So how do we work with developers on offsetting those or figuring that out rather than people looking right at each other, especially in a reduced setback environment?
If I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Valniscus.
Thank you. So the other option would be to essentially eliminate those balconies on most units. It's a challenge with these smaller properties in the Wilson Crescent area and elsewhere where development, you know, there needs to be a certain density to make it work. And with the numbers kind of dropping below probably where this development is, you either get a tighter set of homes. So in this case, they've broken up the buildings into, you know, what we normally would see just 2 buildings and the road down the middle. They've broken the side up a bit more. And that's the challenge. You have to put this outdoor space somewhere. Having no outdoor space for those units, is not ideal as well. So it's a tricky balance.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, our DP area guidelines talk about, cooler roofs and cooler colors for roads. And we've got a one earth here concept, but we also have really dark sheet metal roofs. And I recognize our guidelines are guidelines, but it doesn't seem to me that a charcoal roof is the way we should be heading in a warming climate. So can you just comment on the color schemes of those, both the road and the roofs?
Through the mayor, we asked the applicants to change the colors of the buildings, so that's why you have the red color for for the alternating units. The color for the roofs did not come up, and it also wasn't discussed during the ADP meeting either. So that was one of the reasons why we did not get them to change the color for the roofs.
Councilor
Yeah.
Pettingill. Oh, yep. Go ahead, Mr. Valmiscus, if you want to add something. And then I'll
Yeah,
go to Councilor Pettingill.
Thank you. I'm sure this is the color of the roof is a fairly minor detail, likely from the applicant's perspective. So if council wanted to approve this with a condition that the roof color and the paving be of a lighter tone, we could likely work with that.
Thank you. Councilor Pettingill.
Oh, thank you. And I apologize, my camera isn't on. It won't start on my computer tonight. So the vegetation, there's a note that it doesn't meet the guideline in terms of retaining prominent existing mature vegetation because the site needs to be raised 0.38 meters in order to provide mandatory minimum clearance to site services. I'm making a couple assumptions that there are some large trees on this site and that a tree could actually withstand that amount of soil being raised around it. And maybe that's incorrect, but I wanted to check if this is a valid, if there are big trees, can't we just raise the soil and the trees would be fine?
Who wants to tackle that one?
Through the mayor, there will be 27 new trees planted on the site, and there are 2 invasive species, the English holly and the Himalayan blackberry on the site as well. And then also due to the siting of the buildings, some of the trees will not be able to retain because there will be townhouse developments being built on top of them.
Okay, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of, I guess, criticizing our guidelines. But as I understand the guidelines, the idea is to kind of build a development around where some of the big trees are. And so I guess I'm wondering is staff can comment on where that line is, where we're sort of saying, no, those large trees are important. We need to find a way to keep them.
I could tackle that.
Go ahead, Mr. Valmiscus.
It's a fair point, and I think the fine line is the size of the property. These are fairly small multifamily lots. So as I said, we're I think this proposal is teeter-tottering on what is feasible from a density perspective to make it work performance-wise. And I do like trees being an issue where there are soils being raised, is something that we see fairly commonly. So I do believe that the survival of those trees, once you raise the ground around them, is limited.
So one final one. I think I'm pleased to see the gas covenant, but I didn't see a reference to gas for cooking as well. Is that included in this, or if not, what would it take to have a complete no gas covenant?
Through the mayor, the heating and cooking facilities should both be electric and will be noted in the no gas covenant.
Councillor Herford?
Thank you. In the section about the usable open space and the reduction of the dimensions, it's in the staff report. It mentions the other areas, sort of some communal space, the pocket park in the front, and the other little space. Is there a total of those square meters? And if we are going to, in essence, score in a cumulative sort of way, is that something that's, I guess, common to work with, or we should expect to see going forward if the communal space can't be achieved in sort of one piece?
Through the mayor, I can speak to the addition of the separate communal spaces. They do add up to around 490 square meters, which is in line with the open space requirement. I'll have to get my director to speak on whether we can allow the breakup of the open space.
Mr. Vilniuskas, do you have any further comments on that?
No, not really. I think Rich has the numbers on this.
All right, so yeah, one last one and then we'll go to the public. Go ahead, Councillor Race.
Thank you. So some of the concerns expressed have been with respect to these variances for the patios, or the balconies rather, and with respect to buildings 2 and 3 at the rear and buildings 4 and 5 at one side. But did the developments on either side of those, the ones at the back and the ones on that one side, did they meet the setbacks? I'm trying to look at the overhead, but the scale is wrong, and frankly, I can't really tell from the overhead.
The townhouse developments to the north, which are the rear yard, they received a side yard setback from 4.57 meters to 3.81 meters. And then there was also a rear yard setback variance for a duplex being built on Buckley, which this property also neighbors.
Thank you.
All right, so with regard to development permit with variances number 558, the proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard either in person from council chambers or electronically on the telephone or computer with respect to the proposed variances to District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200, 2011. There are 4 proposed variances to the zoning bylaw, and the proposed variances have been outlined in the staff report. And so we know it is varying the rear setback from 9.15 meters to 5.32 meters. That the interior side setback is changed from 4.57 meters to 2.74 meters. With regard to accessory buildings and structures, that it is varied from not less than 1.52 meters from any side or rear lot line to not less than 0.9 meters from any side or rear lot line. And the fourth variance is the usable open space, common definition from having no dimension less than 6.10 meters to having no dimension less than 4.57 meters. So all speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. Please note that there is limited capacity from council chambers, but so far, the people that are here, we all fit and still follow all the rules. And so details to participate via telephone or electronically on WebEx are displayed on the screen for those who have logged in from your computer or watching the live stream of the meeting. We also have instructions on our website. So if you're participating electronically, in order to get on the speakers list, just raise your hand, so to speak. If you're on the telephone, it's *3. And if you're on WebEx, you open the participant panel and you click on the hand icon. And if you're here in council chambers and you wish to speak, just raise your hand. I will acknowledge you. Come to the podium. You don't need to touch the mic. Harley, working on our sound, will do all that for you. And when it's your turn to speak, you'll start by stating your name and address or neighborhood. If you're participating electronically, you'll get a voice prompt. Or on WebEx, you'll get a little dialog box, and then you'll hear our moderator, who is Melissa this evening, will chime you in. So if you experience any technical difficulties, please use the chat function on WebEx to send our host a message, or you can email hearing@squamish.ca. And so just a reminder to everyone, this isn't a rezoning where you can speak to any number of issues. It's a DP with variances, so folks are limited to speaking to the 4 variances that I outlined just now. So I'll first go to our moderator to see if there's anyone online that wishes to speak. Not yet. Okay. Is the proponent here and wishes to speak? Okay. All right. Anyone here from the public that would like to speak to this DP with variances? Yep, come to the podium and just start with your name and your address or neighborhood, whichever you prefer. And you can take your mask off when you get to the podium.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Council and Chair. My name is Stephanie Houston. I'm a resident at 38447 Buckley Avenue, Unit 6 of Arbutus Grove Townhouse. I will do my best to limit my remarks to 5 minutes, but the other residents and owners have asked me to raise a number of points on their behalf, and I understand they'll also be speaking afterwards, so I will try to divide it up. We're here tonight because we have serious concerns about the variances that have been proposed and the impact on quality of life that they would have and the precedent that they would set for the neighborhood. I'll leave the impacts, which we've outlined in our written submissions on privacy and natural light for now, but I want to focus really on the issue of precedent because I think it came up in staff presentation tonight, and I think it's worthy of addressing. Because of the impacts that we would experience, probably most notably on privacy, we think that this precedent in the neighborhood would have significant impacts in the future for all future developments in Wilson Crescent, really. Wilson Crescent Neighborhood Plan represents a vision for the neighborhood that was put together after extensive consultations with the neighborhood, with residents, and council and staff hold that vision for the residents. It also represents a balance between the need for growth in the neighborhood while maintaining the character and quality of life of the neighborhood. And it speaks to a careful integration of new developments with existing developments. The guidelines are the tools that make that vision possible. And they're all small different pieces, but they fit together to create a coherent whole. And not addressed in the staff presentation, but one of the guidelines speaks directly to variances, section 4.23. I won't really go into detail either because we talked about it in our written submission. Suffice to say that the Wilson Crescent area guidelines do not support variances except in very specific conditions. Usually when there's some sort of compelling reason, either demonstrated need or unusual site conditions, as council saw a few weeks ago with 38439 Buckley Avenue. In this case, it is our opinion that the applicant has not demonstrated any of those compelling needs for this development. What would result would be, I do have to mention privacy because building 2 would face directly into the units 1, 2, and 3 of Arbutus Grove. So people eating dinner would be looking at other people eating dinner. The balconies in the yards overlook each other. It is pretty significant for quality of life. And it's not just about this development, and it's not just about Arbutus Grove, but it's about the entire neighborhood and a chipping away at the vision that was put forward in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood plan. I want to address just a few more issues around precedent. The 2-meter sidewalk in Pocket Park, council approved another development, Harbor House on Wilson Crescent in 2020, that also has a 2-meter statutory right-of-way for a sidewalk in Pocket Park that, aside from a minor variance to the side setback, otherwise fits within the site constraints. As a result, there's far fewer impacts on privacy and natural light. You can see from the shadow study from that development that the shadow does not even come close to the property line at Equinox. I also want to mention the precedent related to Arbutus Grove, which is a side setback versus a rear setback, which is a smaller area. That variance was minor, but does change the impacts on future developments that are coming on the rear, like this one. So it's not all problems. We have thought of a number of solutions that we'd like to propose to council and to staff. Probably most significant would be to change the orientation of the building at the northwest corner to match the orientation of building 1 and move it to where the current communal space is. That would allow the applicant to move the green space to the rear of the yard and increase privacy and distance. Also, the reorientation would change this effect of having units looking directly into one another. There could also be a reduction in communal space, although in Arbutus Grove, I think this happened because of the existing amenities around the area. We propose a number of other solutions in our submission. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. And I think I just want to address also the suggestion around the bylaw amendments in the future. With respect, if those changes do happen, they will have to go through a legislative process, and they won't. I don't think it's fair to make a decision tonight on that basis. We're here tonight because we really care about this. We care about this neighborhood, and we think this issue is vitally important. Development can and should work for everybody, and there are changes that can be made to improve this development and its impacts on the neighborhood. We think it's vitally important that this decision be taken carefully, and we request that council not approve the application tonight. Once this building is built, it will be there permanently, and so will the precedent. We want to set a precedent.
That's time.
Okay, thank you.
Are you almost done?
I'm pretty much close, yeah.
Okay, just another 30 seconds then?
Yeah, I'll just in closing, we want to set a precedent for thoughtful development and in Wilson Crescent that respects existing residents as well as creates wonderful new homes for new occupants. We think this is important not just for us, but for future residents who will face developments in the future. It is a rapidly developing area, and we would like to see that happen here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just go to the moderator. Is there anyone online with their hand up? So that's *3 on the phone and the participant panel and the hand icon if on WebEx. So I'll come back to Council Chambers. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to the variances this evening? Yep, come up to the podium. Your name and address or neighborhood, whichever you prefer.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Walton, and I'm a resident also of Arbutus Grove Townhouses, which is directly to the north of the proposed development. There's a lot of variances being requested tonight, and it does seem like it's a bit of a quid pro quo on the developer because they need that sidewalk put in, which is a requirement from the council. So they just want something in return, which doesn't seem the way it should be. I'd like to point out that everyone from Beautis Grove townhouses, there's 11 units, is represented here tonight, online or in person, and supporting the written submission that we submitted to the council. Touching on natural light, I just want to touch on the shade report in the development. The shade report's done in March, which is the midpoint between the summer and the winter, and it shows that the sun's actually up the side of our buildings at midday. So pretty much through 6 months of the winter period, there's going to be no sunlight on our buildings coming in our windows at any level. And then even during the summer, like outside the hours of around midday in the AM and the PM, the building will be subject to shade. So it's a bit misleading to have a shade report, which is done in March at midday and not indicating, which is about the only time there's going to be sun on the building. The only aspect that has large windows on our buildings is to the south. So having the variance to have the development closer to the boundaries just going to obscure the natural light and the sunlight and the views, which the Wilson Crescent development plan sort of provides some guidance there to consider those things. So there's no consideration. There's nothing to consider our natural light. It's just it's taking it away from our buildings. No developer has had a chat with any of the residents on what they're doing, where the buildings are, or anything. So it's this is our only forum to present what we don't like about the variances or would like to see changed in the development. So things can be moved around in their plan to not only not use a property building variance, but to move them back further and create more open space and more sun and more privacy and maintain the views of which Squamish is famous for. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I think we have someone online. Greg Pillow?
Actually, unmute me. There we go. Hi there. This is Gregory Pilon. I'm a homeowner at unit number 1 at 38447 Buckley, the Arbutus Grove, and I would like to speak to the issue of the impact on our privacy as a result of the requested rear setback. I want council to understand, and this is to a point that I think was made by the mayor earlier. I want council to understand what the impact this will be on our quality of life. These units are very nice units. They've got a big living room window facing and a big upper floor master bedroom window with a pretty good view, and also a rear facing balcony at the second story level. With the setback variance as being proposed, we will literally be staring at each other across a narrow gap of a few meters. We won't be able to leave our blinds open. That whole aspect of our living space will be changed dramatically. Also, to Maddie's point earlier, with regards to the very limited amount of sunshine that we currently receive would be basically eliminated. So the habitability, the quality of life of units 1 through 4 will be adversely affected by this. And I'm a little concerned, to be honest with you, that staff has paid so little attention to this factor, especially when it could be solved so much more easily by relocation of the common area as proposed. I think that, to be quite honestly, folks, curb appeal has taken precedence over the privacy of the neighborhood. And I would propose that the proposed rear variance be disallowed and the site be designed in an alternative fashion. Oh, I'd like to raise one other point very quickly with regards to the number of parking spaces that this unit will bring into the neighborhood. As I understand it, we're looking at potentially parking spaces for 24 vehicles. This is going to add significantly to the localized greenhouse gas and I guess general internal combustion engine emissions for that specific area. So all of a sudden, where we've had clean air now, we're going to be breathing the exhaust from cars that are, I guess, from 8 different units, basically facing our backyard. So for these reasons, I would very much encourage council to take a second look at this design. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. Is there anyone else here at City Hall that would like to speak to the variances this evening? Yep, come forward. Your name and address or neighborhood.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name's Chaz Wells. I live at Arboretus Grove, unit number 2. And I just wanted to say, and just kind of reiterate in support of what most of my neighbors have been saying, is that I think our privacy is going to be, I'm in unit 2. I'm going to be probably less than this distance from you to me, looking into their master bedroom while they're getting dressed, or I'm getting dressed, or I'm enjoying a movie, or they're enjoying a movie. So to me, I just think that the privacy issue is a very big factor in the decision-making for this proposal. So I would like to recommend that you send it back to council, back to staff to rethink. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to moderators. Anyone else online? All right. And in City Hall, yep, come forward.
Hello, my name is Chris Morrow. I'm in resident of Arbutus Grove, Unit 3. So like Chaz and Greg earlier, my unit would be directly impacted by the proposed variances. I'd like to just put a couple questions to council. I don't expect answers right now, but I'd like you to consider these. So there was an offer by, I'm assuming, the developer to accept a condition related to both the neighborhood improvements, but also maybe a roof color. So I'm just curious, like, who's actually going to go and fact check that, or like make sure that stuff's actually delivered? And then also for those potential improvements, which do appear to be quid pro quo, as Maddie pointed out, how are they prioritized? Will the neighborhood receive the benefit before the developer gets to build their properties, or do they get to build it and there's no timeline? So I'm curious, like, what the reasonable time frame would be for any of those improvements, or if they actually incorporate them into what's delivered, and who actually audits that. And then Councillor, sorry, I don't see your full name, apologies. One of the councillors raised a question around the whale raising the soil, kill the trees. Who's actually going to fact check that? Because there was a response by someone who may not be an arborist. Will that be deferred to an arborist to consider that question before this application is approved? I'd like to also just say I fully support Stephanie's comments as well as the submitted memo and the opinions of Unit 1 and Unit 2 on privacy. And finally, I just want to say one thing, that the trees on this property is, they're quite mature. I stare at lots of animals every day. I don't have a list of all the different types, but squirrels and birds. There's some mature fruit trees over there. We get bears sometimes because of those, but the rest of the animals that are there, they're going to lose their homes. And so I understand that within the applicant's submission, they said that they would put in new landscape But I wonder what that actually means. Is that trees this big that take 30 years to grow back to the same mature size? Or are they actually going to bring in landscaping from day one that would maintain the privacy of the adjacent lots, but also provide an equal amount of homes for the animals that live in those areas? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We've got two folks online, so we'll do the two folks that are participating electronically, and then we'll come back to Municipal Hall.
Greg Georges.
Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Georges. I'm the owner of Unit 10 at 38447 Buckley Avenue, Arbutus Grove. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate and support all the statements that were made by the other residents and owners at the complex. One of the main things, of course, is privacy. And, you know, like every resident of Squamish, they love living in this community because of the beautiful views, the fresh air, the sunlight, and the natural beauty of the area. So this proposal kind of eliminates all those things from that southern side of our building. It basically makes those patios less usable and less enjoyable. Not only that, the residents that will be moving into that new proposed building, their enjoyment of their patios will also be limited as well. So I also wanted to talk about the precedents that will be set. My unit obviously is a little further over from this proposal, but the setback, if it is allowed, it would change not only the 3 units that is affecting immediately, but also in the future, all the other units in Arbutus Grove if those other properties did develop. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is also participating online.
Jacqueline Menzies.
Hi, my name's Jackie Menezes. I live in Unit 1 of Arbutus Grove. I do support the suggestion that we move the playground to the rear of the development. That would address the privacy issue. It would also address, I think, some of the green issues that were raised about trees and play area and safety for children in terms of garbage trucks coming in and out. I also want to say that whoever lives in that area will have to enter Wilson Crescent at the north end and drive all the way around to the south end. Wilson Crescent is not designed to be a walkable, bikeable area. Is that going to be addressed before this development happens? I know that there was a statement that there's a sidewalk just in front of this unit, but what about a sidewalk all the way around and lighting? There is no complete street to make that a livable, enjoyable space. It's very dangerous to walk at night or even during the day because there's no sidewalks on Wilson Crescent. So as we expand the developments in Wilson Crescent, it's not really a complete street. Also, the number of cars coming into the area, and they're not small vehicles, they're usually pickup trucks coming into that area. They're going to be at least 12 to 24. You have to think about the greenhouse gas emissions that are going to be created where there were only 1 or 2 cars in those spaces. And particularly, I do think the roof color has to be addressed because the reflection or absorption of heat into that area will affect us at Arbutus Grove as well. So I think a change of moving the playground to the back and changing the color of the roof and also building the complete streets, not just in front of this unit, but right around Wilson Crescent would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, folks, that we can just speak to the variances this evening. Council can speak to any portion of the DP, but those speaking tonight are limited to speaking to the variances. Anyone else in council chambers? Yep, come forward.
Hi, my name's Chris Adams. I live in Squamish. I'd like to point out the variance is only 6 feet, so it's my arm width. I don't really see how not allowing that would improve your privacy. I can quite easily see this far. We're adding 27 trees to the property at the removal of 1 or 2, which is improving habitats for birds, all things like that. We're allowing a future trail, an easement in the back for a future trail for the animal safety. I know someone brought that up earlier. The building is designed and built the way it is for curb appeal. We're trying to avoid a monolithic structure and then add like a micro community in the area, make it a little bit nicer. The roof, we can change the color whenever. We're not married to that. That's typically done near the end of the development. Simple task. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to council. Oh, I'm going to go online first. One more speaker online.
Haley.
Hi, everyone. My name's Haley. I'm an owner of Unit 8 at Arbutus Grove. I just wanted to chime in to show my support for my neighbors. As one of the earlier units mentioned, I'm a bit further down in the complex, so I won't be directly affected by this development, but I am concerned about the precedent and definitely concerned about the privacy for those first few units in Arbutus Grove and the trees. Although it's lovely that they'll be planting new trees, as we mentioned earlier, they are very mature trees on that property right now, so it will take quite a few years for any new trees planted to reach the current status of the wildlife and trees that are on that property now. So I don't think I have anything else to add, but I did just want to chime in to show my support for my neighbors, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else online? Okay. I'll come back to Council Chambers in the corner there.
Hi, good evening. I'm Heather Jalak, and I'm a homeowner in Unit 7 in Arbutus Grove. I'm just here to show my support for my neighbors and just to, I guess, articulate my objections to the proposed variances. My concerns are primarily around privacy and also natural light. I actually moved to Squamish 2 years ago today and bought my home 2 years ago today. And like the natural light, the greenery, the environment were all reasons why this area and the kind of the vision of Wilson Crescent really appealed to me. So just concerned about some of the proposals that are being discussed this evening. And yeah, like really appreciate your taking into consideration what we presented today and look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in council chambers that wishes to speak? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephanie Wells. I am a resident of 38447 Buckley Avenue, Arbutus Grove, Unit 2. I'm here to support everything that everybody has said, but in particular, I'd like to draw attention to the communal space around the playground. And this has to do with the rear variance, and just draw your attention to the fact that there is a playground at Squamish Elementary. Howe Sound Secondary is right across the street. There's a basketball area there. There's a skate park and a brand new playground just north of us at the Newport Landing currently being built. I'm not opposed to a communal area and playground for small children. I don't know if the size of that playground could be reduced in order to bring the setback from the back area into line with guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else in council chambers wish to speak to the variances this evening? Yep, come forward. Just your name and address or neighborhood.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Jason Burrows. I'm a resident of the current townhouse complex across the road from this development. My biggest concern is the variance on the southeast side. I noticed it hasn't been mentioned too much from the Building 5 patio. If you see the neighbor's house next door, they are going to be very, very, very close. And from an aesthetic standpoint, I'm the one looking directly at that that variance and how it would affect my view, and it would make that corridor between the buildings very, very, very tight. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention that it should be looked at pretty carefully, because 0.93 meters is not a lot of space between that and the property line. So it's specifically that patio there in Building 5 is the one I'm referring to. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Melissa, anyone else online with their hand up? Okay. Anyone in council chambers still wishes to speak to the variances this evening? Not seeing any hands at the moment, so I'll just go back to council, see if you've got any more questions for staff at this point. Councilor Pettengill?
Yeah, thanks. So there have, I've heard some comments about some willingness or, people seeing moving the play area as a solution to avoid the setbacks, so on and so forth. And I'm wondering if there's been discussions with the developer about that. I did read in the report, there's guidance to make such common areas a little more publicly accessible. But as I understand the location of this one, it's in the middle of the development, doesn't seem publicly accessible. And so from my mind, that guideline, would be just as fine at the back. And I'm just wondering if that is something that staff looked at with the developer to avoid some of the variances.
Through the mayor, we did not have any discussions with the applicant about moving the communal play area to the back of the site.
And then on another topic, it did come up, and I read it in the email, and I noticed myself that the shadow studies only went to 2 p.m. and I thought it actually said June in our report. And so I guess as I read that, I want to be clear what our requirements or guidelines are around shadow studies. My understanding is it's something we're asking for now, but we don't have guidelines requiring that at this point. So just confirming that. But then also, normally in this sort of thing, would we expect to understand the neighboring impacts, the impacts this will have on the neighbors, but also the neighbors' buildings will have on this one? Like, I'm wondering if it's some of the neighboring buildings would have an equivalent shadow impact on this development, or if this is doing something different than the neighboring buildings would do to each other.
Yes, sorry, I can partially answer that. Mr. Valeniskis may want to jump in. I believe we ask for, if I'm correct, shadow studies 4 times a year. I don't know that the dates are specified. Neither are the times. So we're looking for a sampling across the year of shadowing. And really what we should be looking at is what's the difference between the shadowing from the buildable envelope and the variances, because if the shadowing is created by the buildable envelope with no variances, that's sort of not an issue for shadowing anymore. So, I mean, invariably there's going to be, and if you pull a December 21st shadow study, there's going to be an impact with a 2-story building across these sorts of setbacks. So we're going to anticipate there's going to be some impact if you pull December or June dates.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of our current guidelines or regulations, am I correct in thinking this is something we're starting to ask for, but there aren't specific regulations around shadow impacts?
Correct. I don't think there's anything in the zoning bylaw that sets setbacks based on shadowing. It's based on distance from property line.
Mr. Pollitt, I noticed there in sort of the landscape drawings, there is no landscaping proposed at the rear of the property. And is that because the setbacks are so close to the property line that you can't put a full-size tree in there? I'm just wondering, that's where we're hearing about the privacy issues primarily, except for the other corner, and why we wouldn't use landscaping to try and mitigate that.
Through the mayor, there is a 6-foot timber fence being proposed at the rear of the site. If council wants to provide landscaping to provide a buffer between the two units, that is something that the applicant can provide if they're willing to.
Yeah, the fencing certainly takes care of it at the ground level. I'm just thinking about the second story. Just confirming when we expect the delivery of the street improvements, is that at permit or at occupancy? When does that happen?
Sorry, through the mayor, that would be through a servicing agreement, and it could be scheduled whenever from commencement to, we'd want those done at occupancy, so it's all wrapped up at the same time. It's not going to linger for years, and that servicing agreement would secure, have a cash security to ensure those get done.
Now, I thought the proponent originally had the playground at the rear, and then it's been moved to try and break up the buildings a bit. Did I misread that or mishear that? I thought it had actually moved from the rear into the middle, so that we weren't getting just a row of townhomes.
Through the mayor, as far as I know, the communal play area in the middle of the development has always been in the same area.
Thank you. Council, any other questions that will help your decision making? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands from council, so check with our moderator. Is there anyone else online? Okay, anyone else in council chambers? Yep, come forward.
The architect, Stephen Leroy, has been online trying to answer questions. He has his hand up virtually. He's messaging me saying he's not getting through. Nothing? Okay.
I can see him there, but you can't see the hand raising. Okay, but yep, go ahead and.
Mayor, Council?
Yes,
Am I
go
getting
ahead. We
through?
can hear you, Mr. Leroy.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for considering this project. I did want to mention that there has been a lot of careful attention to integration into the neighborhood. We wanted to provide a strong sense of community. And we really wanted to improve Wilson Street with the public space and the provision of the sidewalk. We wanted to provide family-oriented units and avoid a long linear building. With all due respect to the residents of Arbutus Grove, that project is a long linear unbroken building with very minimal open space, whereas this project is really, I think, a good precedent for this neighborhood in comparison to that long linear building. These buildings will have good livable units and will have access to more natural light because of the fact that they have more corners. There's essentially a 9-meter distance between Arbutus Grove and the rear buildings. And the building code treats 9 meters as a reasonable distance between two buildings, not because of views necessarily, but because of fire exposure and exposure across property lines. So it's a reasonable distance between buildings, particularly in areas where one is increasing densities. In terms of the comments around the dark roof, we typically like to use dark roofs because they are less visible to the neighbors. And we totally understand that there is an issue around heat and heat gain. We have to also recognize that we are next to the ocean, which has a very large heat absorption rate in comparison to these small roofs. However, if council is interested in us reconsidering the color of the roof, we're of course more than willing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leroy. I think I saw another hand in council chambers. Did I? Yep, come forward.
I just want everyone to know in this property that there's no, oh, sorry, Chris Morrow, Arbutus Grove. Just want, there's no pathway back there. There's already a fence that would be adjacent to this new development, so it doesn't make sense why there'd be another fence. And I heard something about an animal pathway, but the other properties that would be adjacent to this new development, again, there's no right of ways, like there's only fences or trees and bushes. So it doesn't seem like that part was taken into consideration more holistically. Like it seems like a lot of the considerations are just within the distinct lot of this application. And I think that should be looked at again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Come forward, and I'm going to try and wrap this up. So if you got new information, that would be great.
Matthew Walton, Butis Grove. The developer on the screen was talking, just lost his name there. He didn't respond to any of our issues. He was just all defensive about any issues of natural light. The fact that the shade report was done only in the summer, only at around noon, and any of the privacy issues. So he's talking about a community spirit. We're the community. So we're part of the community, and we've got a big issue with the variances and the issue of moving that building 6 feet. That's a lot. That's a lot of sun. That's a lot of shade. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Any other last comments from folks here at City Hall? Okay. Council, yeah, any last questions for staff? Go ahead, Councilor Race.
Thank you. I wonder, could you repeat the comment you made about the microplan and the variances in the microplan? I think you set out several criteria where the variances might be considered. And I'm just looking through the material for that, and I don't have that in front of me, or at least I can't find it. I'm just wondering if you can repeat what the microplan says about variances, please. Through the mayor, section 4.23 of the microplan, there needs to be a demonstrated need for the variance to prevent reasonable use of the property. The variance would not establish a precedent for other properties, but is responding to unusual site conditions that cannot be accommodated within bylaw requirements. And the original intent of the bylaw requirement is not compromised. Thank you. It was in the other material I wasn't looking at. Thank you.
All right. I'm looking to our moderators, see if there's any more hands online. I'm not seeing any. I don't see any further hands in council chambers. I see one more hand. Just your name, please.
Chris, I spoke earlier. As developer, we've only received one direct comment from one owner, and we did respond to that one directly. So they were saying that we weren't involved in bringing them into the conversation. That's all we've received. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council. This is, folks have given us a lot to think about. Yeah, Councilor Race.
Thank you. I will move the alternate recommendation and speak to it if it's seconded.
That is seconded by Councilor Herford. Go ahead, Councilor Race.
Thank you. And so the alternate recommendation, just so everybody's clear, is not to issue the DP, the development permit, but to refer it back to staff. So a couple of things on these variances, and speaking generally, I mean, council gets a lot of variance applications, and I suppose individually we make up our own minds and set certain standards. And for me, I've been voting in favor of variances all over the district since I was a member of council for a variety of different reasons. And usually they are related to oddly shaped lots or geographic considerations, rock walls or something of that nature. that causes the lot to have some certain difficulties in development. And the one on Buckley Avenue that was previously done was, I think, triangular, if I recall correctly, and so it created some issues around development. And so I have voted in favor of variances usually in those cases where the lot itself creates the challenges. That's not the case here. What we're dealing with is a rectangular space, which is generally optimal for building. The other issue here is the Wilson Crescent microplan, and I was on council when that was passed. And the reason for that provision that we just read out, or staff just read out, is because we recognized when that plan, and this is my perspective, I recognized in that plan that what we were doing was going into a neighborhood and applying what you might call gentle density to a neighborhood that was at that time, and probably still is, significantly single family. And so it is going to become more dense. That was recognized as a community goal. There was a number of different reasons for that: proximity to transit, walkability, and so forth. But that comes with obviously changing character, and we wanted to be, I think, as I say, gentle about that. And when you start having side yard and setback variances, that just makes that process a little bit more stressful, perhaps, for all of the surrounding properties. So as the speaker pointed out, and as the memo points out, that's not the case in the whole district. In this development in some other area might not have a problem with that. But in the Wilson Crescent area, I think we have to be cognizant of that. And I know the applicant has offered, and staff has said, offered to do some road work in different spots in the neighborhood. I'm not happy with that solution. To me, that is just like buying a variance. We'll spend money over there as long as we get density here. And I'm not happy with that in that neighborhood. The other issue that I think we're going to face more and more as we go through this area, and perhaps in other areas, but this area in particular, is where somebody gets a variance and the person next to them doesn't, or because of that variance, they're now too close to the line. It's like the first person to develop in an area gets the variance, and then the next property over has difficulty with that because they're now too close together. So I think we have to be very, very careful with these variances. And it is because of these variances that I have suggested the alternate resolution to send it back to staff. I'm not going to be prescriptive about how that particular issue might be resolved. There was a couple of suggestions from members of the public, and I'll leave it to staff and the proponent to try to work that out. I personally don't have a problem with the waste room. I can see how that particular variance is practical, and it is a relatively small area, and it's not very high, and nobody's living in the waste room. So there's no issues around that particular item. But I can understand with the other ones where getting closer with properties that have met setbacks and so forth does cause issues. And in the face of that microplan, I'm not prepared to let those go. Building 5 is perhaps an exception because it doesn't back onto anything. But certainly the other, not building 5, I beg your pardon, I think it's building 3. But certainly some of those do directly impact adjoining properties. And I think those are the concern. So there may be a solution for that. I'll leave it to staff to try to sort that out. But I'm not prepared to vote to issue the DP at this time.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion put forward. I feel we've seen a lot with these sort of the waste room, and I don't have an issue with that one, that part of it directly, but the variances to the setback, I agree. We heard earlier that the 6 feet isn't a big deal, and if the windows are facing each other, what's 6 feet one way or the other. And I think that's actually important, because no consideration, from what I've heard, I haven't heard any consideration given to the privacy of the neighbors, but not just the privacy of the neighbors, the privacy of the people that we're going to need. Someone somewhere along the way is going to need to live in these new units as well. So it goes both ways. And I think that this area hasn't been explored enough. So is that at this point, I'm not ready to support that variance. Now, hypothetically, if the buildings are oriented different, some sort of landscape, maybe there's a threshold that can be met that would make me feel comfortable that that enough thought has been put into this particular piece to not overly impact the existing buildings, and to make them a nice, comfortable, and private place to live for the future residents. So for me, it's mostly that back setback and the overall sort of horse trading involved in landing there isn't something that I'm particularly fond of. So I won't be supporting the motion, or I will be supporting this motion we have on the table, which is to refer back to staff. So thank you.
Councillor Anderson, then Pettengill and French.
Thank you. I will also be supporting the alternate motion on the floor. Planning Director Jonas Velinskas has referred to a tricky balance, and I respect that the developer and the architect have worked hard to work towards a family-oriented set of units and avoid the long building blocks that, in fact, will be elsewhere on the block. Moving to the playground issue, we've heard tonight the observation that there are a number of other playgrounds, and indeed a new district park is being developed nearby. I do like the idea of retaining a playground in the development, and I think that we have too little attention to these needs in some of our developments going back a couple of decades around town. However, there may be some flexibility to consider alternate scenarios for this playground area. I suggest, and as has already been stated, I'm not going to prescribe either to staff and the developer how they may approach things, but there is the suggestion of reorienting Building 3, I think merits consideration. And adjusting the communal playground, there may be some options there, different scenarios. I think these should be targeted for maybe a way to alleviate concerns. With respect to privacy and shading, I'll first comment that we had a development proposal come before us just a couple of weeks ago in University Heights, and the observation was made by council to staff that these kinds of situations, we really would, on the part of council, benefit from better renderings. Of course, we can go to the site and we can visualize there and take a walk around the neighborhood, but for our purposes, it would be useful to have a different type of rendering in the reports to council so that we can better get a feel of these issues. And I'm sure that, with the graphics and this type available, but I think it really should be explored, not only here, but in future. These types of issues are going to come up again and again, and I think we need to look at new tools for evaluating them for council discussion purposes. The viewscapes, especially for the southeast facing, I'm not sure I have a solution for the other gentleman facing from the other direction. The gentleman spoke this evening, but for the southeast views, I think that this is a key concern of mine and the privacy concerns. Moving to the issue of setting a precedent for future development. Yes, Wilson Crescent has other lots of exactly the same dimensions, and we may expect development proposals on them in the near future. So I think the issue of setting precedents here is a real one, and we should also learn lessons from other developments and learn as we go. But that issue of setting a precedent to me is an important one I'd like to highlight. I'd like to make two additional comments on other themes. First of all, the matter of proposing enhancements to the roadway around Wilson Crescent and pedestrian infrastructure,
I think it's a useful idea. It probably is addressed in the Wilson Crescent plan, the deficits that exist here, and there are safety concerns. It's been noted the district recognizes that on the southeast corner, the exit, if you like, of the Wilson Crescent block is an issue of safety there. But I think that in addition to the concern already raised that the developer would be perceived to be buying a variance, that we should look back at that Wilson Crescent neighborhood plan and identify other opportunities if we are going to be discussing infrastructure improvements and amenities as part of a development proposal. And I'd like to highlight the Wilson Crescent Slough, the former east branch of the Squamish River, which is in very poor shape.
Mr. Anderson, Councilor Anderson, you're getting close to your 5 minutes.
Very good. Well, I think that that is identified in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood plan as deserving of attention, and that could also be looked at as kind of like a linear Blueway Park. Finally, there's comments about the color of the roof, and I think this needs to be deferred to the upcoming or a future development permit area guidelines review. And I don't think we should be making ad hoc choices here with this particular development. I think it needs broader review in terms of the guidelines themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Anderson. Councilor Pettengill.
Yeah, thank you. I'll also be supporting the motion on the floor. Not concerned with the variances for the waste room. I think that makes sense. But what I was hearing, and maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I heard general support for the development with some possible, it sounded to me, workable solutions around some moving of a couple things, maybe preserving some of the trees, dealing with the privacy and so on. I understand some of the architect's rationale, but it just seems to me that at least a conversation to explore some of these things is worthwhile, and I'm hoping that that can be had. I want to address a couple of other things. I've mentioned the trees a couple times, and I think, planting one tree but taking out a legacy tree, I'll call it for lack of a better word, it's not necessarily a one-to-one thing, and it is important. There's a lot of value in gentle densification, but we really have to pay attention to livability. And I think holding on to some of those special places to the degree we can, some of the natural places, even if they're very small. And I think older trees are part of that. And so, how exactly we do that, I'm not sure. And this may not be the be all and end all, but I guess it just seemed to me like there were some solutions that could deal with a couple of these things together that hadn't quite been explored yet. So I'm hoping that that can be done, because on the whole, I do actually like this development. There's a lot of things to appreciate about it. I want to just touch on the comment. A few people talked about a quid pro quo or something like that, as if there's something nefarious, but development does always have impacts. And whether it's community amenity contributions or sometimes with offsite improvements like on sidewalks and so on, we either tax the public to do some of these things, or we can achieve some of it through development. And we have to be careful that the trade-offs are reasonable and beneficial, but it is part of how we avoid charging taxpayers for some of these things that do improve neighborhoods. So I don't want to necessarily rule those things out. Some of my colleagues have mentioned they don't appear to be unusual site constraints here, which is another reason why I think there are solutions that can make everyone a lot happier at the end of the day. Shading studies, it would be great to see our regulations become a little more clear on what our expectations are. And maybe just some pages were missing in our report, but I was missing some times of day and times of the year where I wanted to understand. I also found myself wanting, and it's maybe not reasonable to expect from this developer, but the neighboring buildings, what are the shade impacts going to have here? And so is it equitable, the shading all around? Are we having higher expectations for this one site, which I don't think would be fair? And so that was a piece of understanding where I'm just missing, and hopefully going forward, we can find a way to clarify that sort of understanding. So I think I've gone on enough. But just to say, I do see a way forward for this. I think it just needs a little bit more conversation first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor.
This proposal, I think, is a good one. And I think that this is a good start with some concerns that I believe can be addressed. And I know that back in 2016, the developer of 38447 Buckley did come before council asking for a development permit that included 3 variances in the development. And since then, other developments in the area have been granted variances. And so the precedent has already been set for this neighborhood. And I anticipate that as we see other developments coming forward at Wilson Crescent, more variances will be requested, and I suspect will be granted. So the requested setbacks for this project, in my mind, are particularly generous. The rear setback in particular, I note from the landscape plan that it's all lawn and no trees. Has been wondering if there's any possibility of this coming back with some kind of tree separation in that rear setback. And we're already seeing that in the side setbacks for this project. And I particularly relate to what's going on both sides of this fence for Arbutus Grove and the developer. At my own house, my own townhouse, I back onto a lot that's currently empty. One day, I'm positive there is going to be a townhouse development in my backyard, and I might be protesting variances that are requested by that developer. So I relate with everybody's struggle with this project, and that's why I'm supporting the motion going back to staff for some tweaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor French. I was really torn on this because there's so many things to consider in terms of achieving some of the goals of infrastructure for the neighborhood, in terms of creating a great environment for the residents that will live there, and then also considering its impact on the neighboring properties. And so I appreciate folks coming to speak tonight and speaking online and hearing your comments. There's a lot to like about this development. And so given that it is going to be referred back to staff, I think for me, the waste room variance is fine. I think the setback variances can be okay, but we do need to address and be a bit more sensitive to the privacy concerns that have been mentioned. On that, I believe it's building, hold on, 3? That is impacting Arbutus Grove and then the southeast corner as well. So, you know, we can look at, doesn't necessarily need to be a full fence. It could be a hedge that extends up past people's balconies. It can be trees, although that's a little more challenging because they lose their leaves in the winter. We can offset buildings a little bit so the line of sight isn't directly into people's homes, but that on-site playground should stay. I see the benefits in my neighborhood all the time about having that right outside your door and what that means for quality of life for the residents there. I do like the open plan of this design. I love the Wonnerf? To work on my pronunciation of that. I love that idea of the textured road and that shared space. I appreciate the pocket park and adding the sidewalk at the front. Again, and I agree with Councillor Pettengill. I don't like the term quid pro quo. Our staff are looking at ways to complete that walkable neighborhood without it always falling to the taxpayer. So it's a balance, and yeah, there's trade-offs. So, you know, if those improvements don't meet the bar for the community, that, you know, in this case, that might not be enough. But I do resist calling them quid pro quos. So overall, I think with some attention to privacy in those two respective areas, this plan has a lot going for it, and I think provides a great addition to the neighborhood. So with that, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Since we've been seated for an hour and 40 minutes, it seems like a 10-minute break would be welcome. So we'll come back at 7:50. Thank you, everyone, for enabling that recess. We are back. And I, of course, just put a Werther's in my mouth, so I can't speak properly. That was bad timing. We're on item 8A1, District of Squamish Solid Waste Utility and Regulation Bylaw, number 2870, 2021, and this is to consider first 3 readings. And I will pass it over to you, Ms. White, who is joining us electronically.
Great, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Shannon White. I'm the Integrated Solid Waste Specialist at the District of Squamish. And I'm here tonight to talk about the proposed Solid Waste Utility Bylaw and Notice Enforcement Bylaw amendments. On November 9th, 2021, at the Committee of Whole, staff presented a proposed Solid Waste Utility Bylaw to replace the current bylaw that is in use. Sorry, I heard feedback suddenly, as well as a proposed amendment to the bylaw, notice enforcement bylaw. During that during that council presentation, staff did receive feedback to bring back and address in the solid waste utility bylaw. During the meeting, there were 3 items raised that are addressed in the report to council. I'd like to note that since then, a 4th item was raised by a council member that is not included in the report to council. However, it is addressed in the updated version of the solid waste utility bylaw that has been sent out and is online, as well as I will address it in this presentation. So without further ado, the first issue that was raised was to clarify the situation or threshold of when the district may discontinue or suspend services to a service property. And with this, I'm talking about residential curbside collection properties. That's what the definition of service property is. So a revision was made and the complete text is provided in the report to council. And so the threshold was determined to or thresholds, I should say, were around the repeated or deliberate non-compliance with the general conditions of being part of curbside collection. And then also if a property is deemed no longer eligible for the service based on a change in use. So for example, an example of this is if a single family home hypothetically is redeveloped into a multifamily home property, right? So then they would no longer be on curbside collection or eligible to receive curbside collection, as well as the ability to discontinue residential curbside collection services due to safety concerns, and that is for multifamily home complexes. The second change that I'm bringing forward tonight to the proposed solid waste utility is to clarify what properties the schedules apply to. I also would like to thank Council, Mayor and Council for the feedback received in the Committee of Whole. It's always great to ensure that our bylaws are robust and really address the needs of the community. So this was taken back, and both schedules B and C, so that's the organic schedule as well as the recyclable materials schedule, were both revised to clarify who or what type of properties they apply to. As well as Schedule D was revised to explicitly outline that those items in Schedule D apply to the landfill and are for items banned from the landfill. The remaining changes 3 and 4 are that there were some formatting errors. There was a couple of blank lines in one of the schedules, which have been edited, so thank you. And then also the item that was not included in the report to council that came up afterwards, it was published after the report to council was published, was the mention of newspaper. So Schedule B did not have the explicit mention of newspaper. It was removed during the edits. Staff had made the assumption that the other examples provided for paper-like products, which is line 7 in the Schedule B, included newspaper. However, after receiving feedback, we have now included it as an explicit example because we do want to ensure that unserviced properties are recycling newspaper products. So that has now been included. So with that, there are two recommendations that staff are bringing to Mayor and Council, that the Squamish Solid Waste Utility and Regulation Bylaw number 2870/2021 be given first, second, and third readings, and that the District of Squamish Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 2418/2018, Amendment Bylaw number 2869/2021 be given first, second, and third readings. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. White. Council, any questions? Councilor Herford, go ahead. You can stop sharing your screen, Ms. White.
Great. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. I will try to do it. Apologies.
I was giving Miss White a minute to solve one problem at a time, but I'll ask my question there too. Maybe it's something could you speak to how the fines would be applied for multifamily? Like, are we finding I'm assuming that we're finding the strata. And I just wondered, in our earlier discussion, I think it was the committee of the whole, we talked about what would be appropriate fine level. And I just thought about the individual fine level versus the multifamily home level.
Great. Thank you, sir. I was just verifying that I'm not on mute. So right now, the intent is that, apologies, I'm just going to verify before I speak because I haven't reviewed the fines since November 9th. So give me one moment. Apologies. I don't have that right in front of me.
That's fine. I was looking for it and couldn't find it right away either. So that's my question. So we'll raise.
But Ms. White, even in multifamilies, some multifamily have their own utility bill as where we live. So it'd be up to the individual homeowner to get it right, despite being in a multifamily zone. But then there's buildings like in condos where the strata is organizing solid waste removal. So is there a difference, I guess, in the fines for those two things?
Thank you. Apologies through the mayor. Yes, so sorry, I just needed to verify. So part of the work that staff did in the revision of the solid waste bylaw was to separate out contamination related to the residential curbside collection and contamination related to multifamily homes or strata complexes that have centralized collection. And thereby separating them, we also have separated the fines. So the fines are very much associated with whether you're on curbside collection or whether you have centralized collection. The fine right now, if you, the fine for curbside collection contamination is $100. The fine for the strata, as raised by Councillor Herford, is $500.
Thank you. And then for both of those, is that per offense? So if it's every 2 weeks ongoing, it could be done every 2 weeks. I know the intent is for education first, but I'm just curious when that could be applied.
Through the mayor, yes. The intent, well, the way the bylaw is that it can be applied with every offense. I'd like to add that we have ensured that there is this compliance agreement reduced penalty has been, so the penalty, if somebody is issued a fine for their for having contamination in their curbside recycling, they can work with district staff to have that penalty, so the $100 reduced to $50 if they follow certain steps. So we're developing a protocol for residents who receive fines to be able to work with us to reduce the fine.
Thank you.
Anything else, council? Ms. White, I'm still concerned about that thing that says we can cancel curbside collection for safety issues in multifamily. Where does it, so we have some older developments that may not have been designed particularly well for curbside collection. Where does that leave those folks? Are we going to try everything we can to make it right, or how does that work?
Yes, thank you. So the intent is that staff, as well as the like the curbside collection contractor, will do everything they can. So an example is there is a very old townhome complex, maybe very old is the wrong word, but an older townhome complex, which is one where we are having safety concerns. And so the curbside collection contractor has worked to bring all the totes instead of bringing their trucks inside the complex where there's a lot of dead ends and tight space. Now they're working with the residents to bring all the totes to the curb or in a more accessible location. So they're sending people in advance to help the residents, putting out flyers, etc. So we are working very closely with those complexes. This is very much a last resort. So yes, there's expectations that staff and the curbside collection contract will do everything they can.
Thank you. Council, anything else? So the motion proposed by staff is to give first 3 readings to the solid waste utility and regulation bylaw. Is there someone who'd like to move that? Moved by Council Herford, seconded by Council French. Any further comments? Council Pango.
Happy to support this. Just giving the conversation. This is one thing where I think I would appreciate as a councillor, maybe an annual report about the number of instances where, if it ever happens, where we decided we just couldn't do pickup for safety reasons or whatever, and just so we can get a sense of, is this having an impact, and if so, where and what kind of an impact?
Council French.
Thanks, Mayor. Speaking in favor of the motion, these changes modernize the bylaw from general neutral wording to updated definitions. The bylaw update will serve us well, I think, as we continue to reduce the waste going into our landfill while encouraging residents to refuse and reduce packaging. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Then staff would like us to consider first 3 readings of the Squamish Notice Enforcement Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw number 2869, 2021. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Race. Any comments on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Weiss. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, next up, 8B1, District of Squamish Bylaw Notice Enforcement for the Wildfire Landscaping Amendment Bylaw number 2865, 2021. Mr. Valniscus, are you speaking to this evening?
Just really briefly, through you, Mayor. So essentially, there was a memo a few council meetings ago about the question that council had regarding daily fines. And so we dug into it a bit more, and as outlined in that memo, the daily fines requirement has to be captured not in the enforcement bylaws, but in the actual wildfire management bylaw. So council can proceed with this bylaw, with the two bylaws for enforcement. And then we'll need a decision whether council wants to leave the wildfire management bylaw as is, which doesn't have the strong teeth for daily enforcement. And we do that at some future point because the emphasis is on education first. Or does council want to change the bylaw when we come back? So we would have to repeal third reading and go back to second reading and change that.
All right. I noticed Ms. Phillip trusted you with this presentation again tonight. So I hope you live up to her expectations this time around. Councillor Race.
Thank you. So through to Mr. Belanishkas, so are we talking about a provision in the bylaw that says each day is a separate offense? Is that the thing that's missing from the bylaw?
Through the mayor, that's correct. But that provision has to go into the actual bylaw that regulates the activity rather than the enforcement bylaw.
For myself, I'd rather go back and fix the bylaw.
Councillor Ford.
Sorry, and so it doesn't have the daily piece now, but what does it have? Is it a weekly, monthly, just a one-time offense? Where is it right now?
Through you, Mayor, it's a bit of a gray area. The advice we have is that it's best if you are explicit in the bylaw. If council's intent is to be able to apply it on a daily basis, if the offense continues. If that's not the case, then it sort of falls back to per offense. So when the offense occurs, you issue the fine, and you don't issue until a new offense occurs.
Yeah, that doesn't quite sit right with me. So I'd like to open the bylaw back up. It feels like we didn't get that one quite right.
Councillor Pettengill.
If we were to leave it, because we are focused mostly on education, and someone got to a point they got a fine, would then they be grandfathered if we didn't make this, or if we then subsequently made the daily change, they would have paid their one-time fine and effectively grandfathered, and they'd be okay. So I guess I'm just trying to decide if it is worth going back now to avoid that grandfathering, recognizing we probably wouldn't apply it for a couple of years at least anyways.
Through you, Mayor, I believe it's the grandfathering provisions usually work with zoning. So when there's a use in the zone, this isn't it's a regulatory bylaw that relates to something like a business license, so operational activities on the property. So I think that there isn't that grandfathering applicability in this case. And Ms. Phillip and I had discussed this. If we did have a repeat offender or somebody who didn't want to fix the issue, fines are only one tool in the toolbox. If there was a serious offender, we would probably go through an injunction process rather than relying on fines to get compliance.
Any other questions? Well, I'm going to move the staff recommendation to give it third reading. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor French. So I think we can proceed because I just don't see a scenario where we're finding someone multiple times over a hedge. I think that if it was really egregious and we felt like it was a matter of life safety, we would get a court injunction. And so I think because the focus right now is on education, we just move this forward. I think we're going to be using education more than anything else for years to come as we help our community transition to be more resilient in light of wildfire risk. So I'm not seeing a lot of scenarios where having that teeth in the bylaw makes sense to me. So that's why I've put forward third reading. I think we can move forward. And also, this was in a memo at a regular business meeting. And I think at that time was the time to pull it and refer it so that we weren't putting third reading on the agenda. Would have been my preference. That's why we put it on the other agenda. Councillor French.
Speaking in favor of the motion, I think that this is something that I would like us to get started on. I want to get this moving. It's an important piece of education for our community, and to send it back to staff and set it back, I think works counter to what we're trying to do here. I'd rather see us move forward on it now, get the education started, and deal with this fine aspect down the road. Give the community an opportunity to get educated before we start getting forceful with people. Thank you.
Other comments? Councillor Petgill.
Yeah, I'm happy to move forward with this, especially with the clarification on the grandfathering or lack thereof. And I think there's a lot of new stuff in the bylaw. We may have some things we want to tweak in the next few years anyways. And when that comes around, maybe we just put in the teeth when we're doing those things just for completion. But I don't see the necessity to go back right now personally. So I will support the motion. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And then we just need to do third reading for the Squamish Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw for the wildfire landscaping. This is Amendment Bylaw 2866, 2021. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so 8C, District of Squamish, this is for adoption of the District of Squamish Remuneration and Expenses Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw 2858, 2021. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any comments? Last call. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then District of Squamish Fees and Charges Bylaw. This is the amendment bylaw for Ocean Pavilion number 2868, 2021, that be adopted. Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor French. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. Under item 9A1, we have the appointment of a bylaw enforcement officer. That council appoints Stuart Meikle as District of Squamish Bylaw Enforcement Officer. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. Any comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Council, we are now on item 10, our consent agenda. If there's anything on this agenda that you need to pull because of conflict or because you want it voted on, let me know. Councillor Anderson?
I'd like to pull item 3 under correspondence, please. That's the new Senior Center Advisory Board letter.
Thank you. We'll deal with that after correspondence action requested. Anything else? All right. I'll move approval of the consent agenda with that letter pulled. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. I don't think there's any late agenda items this evening. So under correspondence, item 12, action requested. That correspondence received regarding government road improvements be referred to the 2022 budget process and the Director of Engineering for response. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. That correspondence received from Diamond Head Land Development regarding North Crumpet Community Engagement be referred to the Director of Community Planning. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. That correspondence received from D. McCullough regarding Mamcombe Road be referred to the Director of Engineering for response and follow-up. And to Staff Sergeant Bradley for consideration of speed enforcement. Moved by Council French, seconded by Council Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then we have a letter from S. Ashton, the Crisis Intervention and Suicide Prevention Center of BC, regarding saving BC's crisis lines. I believe this has to do with the province putting these lines out to tender. This is for Council's consideration. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Mayor Elliott, I'd like to suggest a motion that this letter be referred to 4 community organizations, and I hope I've covered the ones that that I have in mind. I think it's more appropriate for these community organizations to be addressing this advocacy issue, although we do take up advocacy, say when we bring a resolution to the provincial floor of the UBCM, for example. But I'd like to suggest a motion that this letter be referred to 4 agencies. Eastway Health Services, which is a division of the Squamish Valley Operations of the Squamish Nation. That's YUUSTWAY, Eastway Health Services. They deal with crisis programming. The House on Women Center. Thirdly, the Sea to Sky Community Services. And finally, the Helping Hands. Refer this letter to them for their consideration. I think that's my motion.
Seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further comments? Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, I just wanted to support this. I think we did something similar with Safe Supply, and as I recall, got very useful feedback from Helping Hands at the time, which I found helpful in understanding whether or not as a council we should take a position on the ask of us. So I really support getting the feedback from the community organizations as suggested by my colleague.
Thank you. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, that correspondence received from the Squamish Environment Society regarding a request for approval of a $40,000 budget submission for habitat connectivity be referred to the 2022 budget process for consideration. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any opposed? Motion carries. And that correspondence received from Minister Chen, Minister of State for Childcare, regarding our UBCM meeting on September 13th that we held with Pemberton be referred to the Planning Department. And I know we have resubmitted our application, which was due today. So keep your fingers and toes crossed. Moved by Councillor French. I'll second that. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Anderson, do you wish to speak to the letter that you pulled?
Yes, thank you. The letter in question is from the Senior Center Society, and it's introducing a new Senior Center board elected at the recent AGM. Councillor Herford and I attended a council coffee event at the 55 facility just last week. I won't speak for Councillor Herford, but I think both of us heard a good deal from the members and board members of the Senior Center Society that were present. And I'll just highlight a few issues. Availability of the facility for seniors' uses came up. Fees for facility use. Opportunity for new uses. Ideas came forward. Days that the facility is open for seniors. Patterns of use by other groups that was causing concerns, such as traffic through activity spaces that were in use, traffic through the rear door, and balance of uses between the 3 facilities, Brennan Park, the future West Winds, and the 55, a desire for input. I just came away with the impression that we can always strive to do a good job in our fostering relations with the Senior Center Society, and I think it's a good initiative on their part to send us a letter, send the district a letter regarding their new board and and contact persons. So I'll move that this be referred to staff, this letter from the Senior Center Society.
There's a seconder. Seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 14. Recommendations from Committee of the Whole, November 9th, that the district received the Affordable Housing Society bylaw report from Community Planning and Infrastructure and include feedback as was noted at the November 9th Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish endorsed the off-leash dog implementation strategy as outlined by Community Services on November 9th, that the proposed off-leash dog locations are piloted as John Hunter Park, Merrill Park, Brennan Park, Fence Dog Run, Powerline Service Road Trails, and that staff begin public engagement for a downtown location to be used as an off-leash dog park. Councillor French, you moving that?
Oh, I would like to explore separating these two and having the public engagement for downtown as a completely different motion. So I would move the first half.
Councillor French moves the first part. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Councillor Herford and Mayor Elliott oppose. And that carries. And that staff begin public engagement for a downtown location to be used as an off-leash dog park. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Councillor French?
Yeah, over the last week, I've been thinking about this part of the motion. And public engagement for a downtown off-leash park. Staff have been engaging public on off-leash parks for the entire community, including downtown, for many months. And the results of that work produced the recommended locations throughout the community, and none of the recommendations are in the downtown area. So I've just found myself trusting that if staff felt there was a location downtown that fit the criteria, a downtown location would have been highlighted. So I'll be voting against this part of the motion. That's why I wanted them separated. I just feel that the work has already been done.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. And I recognize the challenges downtown, and I probably went through some similar visioning as Councillor French and others, that, you know, trying to figure out where this actually might happen. But I don't want to close the door to the engagement. I think the engagement doesn't hurt to engage. And there's a lot of people downtown with dogs. There's no question about that. Where we find land certainly is a challenge, but maybe not impossible. So I can support the engagement and will support this motion.
Councillor Herford, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion. I think one of the most important pieces of this whole project is really being able to provide spaces where people can go, so we can enforce in places we really don't want off-leash dogs. And for me, the estuary, the wildlife management area, we as a community need to do a better job there of protecting the wildlife. And I think that without a viable option in the downtown, it's going to be really hard to truly affect the behavior in the estuary. So I support this and this direction. And I also hope that one of the reasons I opposed the previous motion was around the engagement. We heard something 80 some odd % of the respondents were dog owners. So I hope that in this round of engagement, we can see more representation of the people using these spaces that don't own dogs. So anyways, I look forward to the outcome of the work, and I don't think it will be easy to find, as I know some work has been done in this direction already, but I do think it's crucial to protecting the wildlife in the estuary.
Seeing no further comments. Oh yes, Councillor Anderson, what about you? And you need to put your hand up earlier, Councillor Pettigill. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I think that I'd like to take voice the observation that the engagement report that we received was really very comprehensive, and it appeared to reflect a very good, robust process. Sometimes, however, it depends on the questions that are asked as to what we get back. And I think that this is an opportunity, so I will be supporting the motion for this public engagement specifically focused on downtown, because when we prompt the public and downtown residents and downtown visitors for specific new ideas, brainstorming, I think we will get some ideas come forward and some new thinking in addition to what's already been accomplished in the engagement program. Speaking to people in the Eagle Winds neighborhood, there are people there with some suggestions. There's concern around the estuary has been mentioned. Now, the former municipal landfill and some of these adjacent areas are not quite in the estuary, and they could use some better attention and management, in my view. And so there may be options in the downtown that some brainstorming effort through this new engagement plan would bring forward. The Winnipeg Park has also been mentioned last time around when we discussed this. So I'll be voting in favor of the motion.
Councillor Pettengill.
Thanks. I'll be supporting the motion. I can see that the downtown is challenging, but the reason I'm supporting this is I think some sort of solution can be had, and that's unresolved. Also, though, in my vote of support is an acknowledgement that I don't think we've really defined any scope or anything on this. And so I am somewhat expecting staff to come back to us with a question about, well, what is the scope and the cost and so on. And so that's in the back of my mind, that sort of setting a direction. There's a bit more work to do here, but expecting that question to come forward. But in the meantime, I will support this.
I'll call the question. Any opposed? Councillor French opposes. Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? We don't have any committee minutes or reports to receive this evening. No in-camera items to announce. We did not have anyone put up their hand for unscheduled public attendance. I don't suppose there's anyone online that wants to ask a clarifying question. No. Councillor staff announcements. Councillor French.
Thank you. I wanted to share news from the Squamish Food Policy Council. The Squamish Climate Action Network has partnered with School District 48 to build an 1,100 square meter school farm at Howsound Secondary School. Thought this was kind of exciting and we're sharing. The farm will provide learning opportunities for students and provide for sustainably grown food. And the plan is to break ground this winter and plant seeds in the spring. Community donations are being gathered to fund the capital costs. Thank you.
That is fantastic. Councillor Pettengill and then Councillor Race.
Yeah, two things. So on Friday night, I went to an event hosted by the Howsound Society for the Performing Arts, or Performing Arts Society, maybe. Just great performers of all ages. It's really nice to see live music, even if we were all wearing masks. Also got to a taste of Howsound Secondary's poet laureate, who did some of her work over a song with a local band. So it's just really great event. Afterwards, a bunch of the volunteers stayed for a couple hours of teardown. There was a few hours of setup. So a lot of people in the community putting a lot into this event. So thank you everyone who did that. Really enjoyed that. It was a nice break from what's been a pretty busy schedule for me. The other thing, last regular meeting, I think we recognized at the end, we neglected to talk about what had happened at the SLRD, and SLRD meeting is coming up soon, but just thought I'd touch on a few of the things that we talked about end of October now. So we, the regional district accepted the OCP regional growth strategy statements of concordance from all the municipalities, and everyone's was accepted. Just wanted to call out Lillooet in particular, who've done some fantastic work around reconciliation and work with the local First Nation there on integrating that community with the broader community of Lillooet. So it's some really impressive work going on throughout the whole corridor, but in Lillooet in particular. we had a presentation on Metro 2050, and while it was focused on the Metro Vancouver area, all of the other adjoining regions are asked to provide comments. And so just like I think our region is very focused on the climate crisis and equity and moving forward and things that prepare us for all the challenges ahead. So it was really quite inspiring to see what they're planning. And they are thinking about the adjoining regions in their plans in terms of transit and so on. TransLink also did a presentation, TransLink 2050. Again, lots of exciting things. And again, thinking about how they are going to integrate with our region in terms of transit. And nothing new yet, but you can just see how the whole Lower Mainland, at least, is trying to work together in a collaborative fashion to deal with the climate crisis and all the challenges we face again. So really exciting. There was a report on food waste. So how are we avoiding food waste and dealing with food waste and food recovery throughout the whole region? And that was a really interesting presentation on where food is being wasted and what the opportunities are to recover some of that food and avoid some of that waste. So some really good discussions.
Thank you, Councillor Pengill. Councillor Race.
Thank you. Just a reminder that this Thursday at 8 o'clock in the morning at the Tim Hortons on Garibaldi Way, Councillor French and I are the councillors having coffee. And you are welcome to come and have a chat. And that might be one of the last, if not the last, coffee with councillors this fall, I think. I think so, yeah. Anyway, if you are interested, free coffee, 8 o'clock in the morning, Tim Hortons on Garibaldi Way.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. To keep the coffee theme going, last Thursday, Councillor Anderson, as he mentioned earlier in the meeting, and I had held a coffee with a councillor at the 55, and it was a great turnout. And we had, yeah, it was great to see lots of people and to be able to talk face to face about the issues in the community. So I do encourage everyone to take advantage of these when they come up. It's I know I really enjoy getting the firsthand perspectives of our community. So it sounds like there's another opportunity, last one of the fall on Thursday. So go check it out. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. I kind of thought that you would talk about this one because you were there, but Transgender Awareness Week started yesterday. And I'm talking about this because I'm the parent of a transgender child. And that flag that flies at Brennan Park and here at Municipal Hall is a sign of hope for me as a parent of a vulnerable child. And it's a sign of acceptance, which is very much needed in our world right now. So to hear the mayor saying yesterday that we embrace all members of our community, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, nationality, class, caste, religion, belief, sex, language, sexual orientation, identity, age, health, or any other status is important. And anything that we can do to increase acceptance for those who are a little different or even a lot different in our society is something we should do. And Mayor, thank you for those words. And thank you, Council, for supporting initiatives that are as simple as raising a flag, but creating a community. By doing that, creating a community that is a little safer for those who are vulnerable.
Thank you, Councillor French. I couldn't have put it any better than that. And so thank you for letting me put you on the spot. It is really important that we recognize that we want and should be a community that welcomes everybody. And that everyone feels like they can be themselves in our community. So yeah, I did get a chance to speak. There was a small group that gathered. We did not go up on the roof on Monday. It was treacherous, but our staff did raise the transgender flag for this week at City Hall in Brennan Park. And there, you know, Saturday is Transgender Remembrance Day because, you know, this is a group of folks that have suffered violence or have taken their own lives. And it's important to remember that that kind of difference shouldn't lead to that sort of consequence. And so appreciate all the community organizations that were there. House and Women's Center, Pride Squamish, and community allies to help us acknowledge the importance of Transgender Awareness Week and that actions speak louder than flags or words. And so we are making a commitment at the district through our IDEA committee to really look at diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility at the district so that it infuses our lens when we engage with the community, when we plan the community, and when we speak to the community. So important. Also, just a reminder that the public engagement event for the budget is next Tuesday here at City Hall, and it starts at 5:30 with a staff presentation at 6 p.m. People can participate electronically or in person. It's whatever your preference, but council will be here. So, as well as many of our staff to answer questions and to engage with the public. So looking forward to that. So with that, motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to the public this evening, to our staff who helped us, and to council. Good night.